Hey up everyone, welcome. Well, I did mention it and it has happened. I decided that this section of double track that you're looking at now had to go. It looked grand, but it actually served no purpose when I actually tried to run trains along the track. They could come in on either line, but they couldn't cross over between them, and that was the main problem. So, things had to change. So, with my handy old glazing knife, I started hacking away at the track. I thought it would be fairly easy to lift, but, well, sometimes what you think and what happened are completely different things. Originally, I designed the layout with a single track, but for some reason at the 11th hour, for reasons I cannot fathom, I decided to put in a double track with no crossover between them. No madness, I've absolutely no idea why I did that. It looked great, but it meant that when trains came in through the tunnel onto the main platform, they looked like they were on the wrong line. It never quite sat comfortable with me, so that was another reason to change it. It also meant, of course, that I was going to have to rip the tunnel out and the scenery, and that was quite a daunting task. I don't know if any of you probably have ripped scenery out and relayed track, but it's quite soul-destroying. So I set about it. Once I decided where and what the track would look like and where it was going to sit, I started to try and take the track out. I thought maybe I could get it out in one piece and reuse it, but no, I was mistaken. The glue that I'd used, WWC Nix ballast glue, was really good. Very good, in fact. So, of course, it just absolutely splintered out in sections like you can see now. There was no option. I just had to rip it up. I cut through the track further up near the station and then just worked my way round the bend, ripping out the track and throwing it in the bin. I kept some of the plastic sleepers, because I thought maybe able to use them in piles somewhere, put them so they look like piles of sleepers on the side of the track. But basically that's all I managed to salvage from all of that track. There's the trusty glazing knife of 30 years old. Once I'd actually got it all out and the ballast and cleaned the area up, I then started to lay the track. I'd kind of worked out where everything should go. I'd laid track down to make sure that the curve was correct, and I was convinced that it was right. So, in went the point. Excellent. We're on our way back to rebuilding the layout. Thank goodness for that. So I laid down the track, I made sure it was okay, it seemed all right. I glued it down with a good old Copydex technique. I then put in the rest of the track in a nice curve. I think it's a 4th radius curve, if I remember rightly. Might be 3rd, can't remember. And I was very happy with that. But that's when I noticed this. I'd been working straight in front of it, and then when I switched over to look down the line, I noticed that somehow I'd managed to get the pointing kinked, and that was just not going to do. So, yes, you guessed it, I ripped it all up again. By now, of course, the cork was in the right old state, so I had to rip that up as well. Took out a whole section, relayed it, and glued that down. Top day that was. For the, 3rd, 4th time, can't remember now, I relayed the track. This time, it all seemed to work fine. Now you can see the little tunnel that was going to replace the bigger tunnel, which I was going to have to rip out in a minute. I moved on then to the tunnel. I ripped out the original one, as you can see here, and I replaced it with a single entrance. I then sculpted the scenery around it using papier-mâché and Modrock, and finally a mixture of fine plaster, sand and grit to create a sort of rock surface, and painted it up, or started to paint it up. I wasn't totally convinced that I'd managed to match it in. For some reason it almost had like a glossy finish, but it didn't really matter, because in the end the landscaping here was going to cover a lot of that up. As you can see, I started to put the shrubbery in on the edges. I wanted it quite tight. The two reasons. One, it was sort of like the end of the British Rail era, slightly less cared for, and also Heritage Line, where they do tend to be a bit like that. In the end, you can only do what you can do. And I quite enjoyed, really, putting it back together, of course, not ripping it apart. That's, as I say, soul destroying. But here we are, almost with the finished product. I've still got a few things to do, a bit more scenery work on it, but generally speaking, it worked. Conclusion, was it worth it? Yes, I believe it was. I now have a functioning station. I bet it can bring a train in, a shunter comes along, takes the carriages away, engine backs up, then the little shunter puts them on the second line, engine comes in, picks up the coaches, and off it goes, making way for another loco to come in onto the main line, the main station. Next part of the job is I am definitely going to put a head shunt in. It will require a little extension at the station end, a little board just to put the head shunt in. But once that's done, I think that will really, really make the station work properly and will give me the option for some longer shots.